Translation: Maharaj Amrish gave up all attachment to household affairs, wives, children, friends and relatives, to the best of powerful elephants, to beautiful chariots, carts, horses, and inexhaustible jewels, and to ornaments, garments, and to inexhaustible treasury. He gave up attachment to all of them, regarded them as temporary and material. A purport by Srila Prabhupada. Anashaktasya vishayan yathartham upayunjita. Material possessions can be accepted as far as they can be used in devotional service. Anukulyena krishnanu anushilanam anukalpasya sankalpaya pratikulyasya varjanam. In preaching, many things considered material are needed. A devotee should not have any attachment for such material involvements as house, wife, children, friends, and cars. Maharaj Amrish, for example, had all such things, but he was not attached to them. This is the effect of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti parish anubhava viraktir anyatra cha. Bhagavatam 11:42. One who is advanced in devotional service has no attachment for material things, for sense enjoyment, but for preaching, to spread the glories of the Lord, he accepts such things without attachment. Anashaktasya vishayan yathartham upayunjita. Everything can be used to the extent that it can be engaged in Krishna's service. Avajnanatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam jena tasmai sri gurave namaha vanchakalpatarubhyascha krupa sindhu bhaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. So we're continuing in the pastime here of Ambarish Maharaj, who was offended by Durvasa Muni. And there are many, many wonderful lessons, but we'll try and stay with the verse and purport here. And specifically, Prabhupada quotes 3 verses here in the purport. So I thought we'd just look a little deeper into those 3 verses and see what there is that instructive for all of us. I think just looking at the verse immediately, it's not that he gave up his household affairs, wives, children and friends. He gave up attachment to them. So there's a difference, in case we get the wrong side of the stick here, that Ambarish Maharaj gave everything up. He gave up the attachment to these items. And hence, it's a little bit like when we have something that we possess here, and whether it's a book or any item, the book will say, in the care of Nandan, for instance. So that's the mentality here of this verse, that we don't even own the book that we have. We know everything belongs to Krishna, but it's in our care. It's in our care, and as Prabhupada would often say, ownership turns sand into gold. If we are renouncing everything, we'll probably renounce the manner as well, and we won't pick up the litter even here. So it's actually a difference of mentality here. So in the care of. Other schools of yoga, they negate the senses, apart from Bhakti Yoga. They all negate the senses. The senses give us so many difficulties, even to all of us. They give us a lot of difficulties on a daily basis that we wish we often didn't have them. So all the other schools of yoga, they just negate the senses. If we can just get rid of the senses, that will solve all our problems. But the Bhakti Yoga, that school of thought, actually, it acknowledges these senses and it acknowledges the sense objects, but the use of them in the service of the Lord, not the use for our own sense gratification. And that's the difference even in this chapter, Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. Ambarish Maharaj is practicing Bhakti Yoga. And hence he's using everything, as in the purport here we're looking at. And Durvasa Muni, he's an Ashtanga yogi, or a variety of yogas that he performed. And hence he's renouncing the word Durvasa. It's very difficult to ascertain, but one definition what's given of Durvasa is one who has no clothes. And actually he never wore any clothes. So he was very renounced from it. So it was very easy to offend him. If you saw him and you laughed, you were in trouble. So you hear so many pastimes of Durvasa there throughout the Bhagavatam, how people were offended and what happened to them. And it's interesting that the word viraktir is used by Prabhupada here, which means detached. Ambarish Maharaj was detached from these things, whereas Durvasa is a tyagi. So there's a difference between virakti and tyag. Tyag means to renounce. So we don't renounce. We see the use something has for the preaching mission. So we are viraktis rather than tyagis. That difference is being put in the purport. So looking at these three verses, I thought first we'll look at the obvious one, which is anashaktasya vishayan yathartam upayunjita. Prabhupada uses it so many times. This from Rupa Goswami. So Prabhupada, when he was in Bombay, and they just had a function, and the mayor of Bombay had come to see Prabhupada. I think it was at Juhu. They were still building the temple. And the hundi collection had just been made, and Prabhupada had it put on his desk. He sits on the lower desk, and all the money was on the desk. And Prabhupada was counting the notes and putting them accordingly. 20 rupees, 50, in batches. And he was putting the coins to one side. And the mayor of Bombay wanted to see him, he wanted to leave, so he walked into Prabhupada's room. And Prabhupada carried on counting the money. And the mayor of Bombay was very shocked. He said, this is the Swamiji who's renounced of everything. And Prabhupada carried on having a conversation with him. And he said, just now in our Los Angeles temple we have remitted $140,000. And in this temple in England we have remitted this much. And we have so many buses. And he said to him, all the money that we have, we use it in the service of Krishna. Everything that we have. So the mayor, who had originally come in very shocked to see Prabhupada, the founder of the society, he was counting the money. And Prabhupada said, this is the purport of renunciation. That everything we have, we should use it in the service of Krishna. When there is a photograph, or at least a statement of Vivekananda. And Vivekananda, there is some money, and Vivekananda is doing like this. That he doesn't want the money, because it's the root of all evil. And Prabhupada, he told his disciple, you should take a picture of me with all the notes stacked up and my hands are like this. He said, we will use everything in the service of Krishna. He said, they do not know how to use it in the service of Krishna. So, Yukta Vairagya, as this verse is speaking about, is also has its final lines. Has its final lines when the devotees, they said to Prabhupada that we are going and we are preaching in the evenings and we are going to the nightclubs. Because it's Yukta Vairagya, we should be preaching everywhere. So Prabhupada, he said to all of them, he said, make sure you come back. So there is also a fine line to the ability and the eligibility of the individual, how much he can do. So Prabhupada warned them that do come back after you go to the nightclub if you're preaching there. I think the original devotees that came here, and the original Sikhs, and they would go to the nightclubs at night to sing because they were invited to all the clubs to sing the Hare Krishna mantra. And they said it was very austere because the nightclubs, they go on from 11 till 4 o'clock in the morning. If you go to Mangalarti at Soho Street, they'll tell you everyone is going home and we're coming home, whichever way it works. So they also said that it was very austere. Although it was preaching, it was necessary because they were just beginning Krishna consciousness. At the same time, it was very austere. Prabhupada, in his offerings to Bhaktisiddhanta, says the following, and he reads this in his Vyasa Puja offering. And again, this is related to the verse, Yukta Vairagya Uchyate. Prabhupada says the following: Gentlemen, do not for a moment think that my Gurudev wants to put a complete break to the modern civilization, which is an impossible feat. But let us learn from him the art of how to make the best use of a bad bargain. And let us understand the importance of this human form of life, which is fit for the highest development of true consciousness. And let us not neglect it. The best use of this rare human form of life should not be avoided. Let us not misuse it in the vain pursuit of material enjoyment, or in other words, for the sake of only eating. It's interesting how Prabhupada quotes the four principles here. He says, for the sake of eating, sleeping, fearing, and sensual activities. Different way of using the words. The Acharya Dev's message is conveyed by the words of Rupa Goswami, Anashaktasya Vishayan Yathartham Upayunjita Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchyate. One is supposed to be situated in the full renounced order of life if he lives in accordance with Krishna consciousness. He should be without attachment for sense gratification and should accept only what is necessary for the upkeep of the body. On the other hand, one who renounces things which could be used in the service of Krishna consciousness under the pretext that such things are material does not practice complete renunciation. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Prabhupada, in his offering to Bhaktisiddhanta, he speaks on this verse. And of course Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he was well known for the principle of Yukta Vairagya. Beginning, of course, with the fact that the Gaudiya Math started to use so many things that traditionally was never used in India. And Prabhupada often speaks about the use of things. He uses the microphone as a standard analogy, that this microphone has no use if we're singing songs of the material world. But if we are speaking about Krishna, then it is renunciation. So Bhaktisiddhanta, he very much used this principle, and the story is there when the Viceroy came to the opening of the Bhaktisiddhanta Road and the Chaitanya Math. And he wouldn't come, and his entourage would not come, because they would only come if they could eat meat every day. And it was a long spell, 3-day opening. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he organized for all of them the menu that they could have meat every day. So that is, an acharya could do these things. We can't do these things, but he had organized this, and then even he had organized that the Viceroy, and wherever they were staying, and the cooking was done in the Chaitanya Math, actually, of the meat. Yes, for the British associates, yes, for them. And when Sridhar Swami, he complained to Bhaktisiddhanta and he said to him, why are you doing this? Just for the British. And even if we had to do it, we're cooking it in the Chaitanya month. He had organized different people to come. I think it was the Muslims of the area. They'd come to cook. He'd asked them to cook. And he said to Sridhar Swami, he said, 100 lives ago, I had decided that I will do anything for the mission of Mahaprabhu. Who are you to advise me? Only an acharya can say these things. We can't imagine that we can do these things. But that was Bhaktisiddhanta Yukta Vairagya. And he'd used that principle. He allowed his sannyasis to wear shoes, which was never allowed. Again, he said, this is for the preaching mission. He had allowed his brahmacharis to eat chapatis on Ekadashi as long as they went on book distribution in Navadvip. So he was quite amazing in that way. He had driven into Radhakund in a Cadillac with a chauffeur. And when the Babajis of Radhakund all came to look, who is this driving into Radhakund with a chauffeur with a hat on? And Bhaktisiddhanta came out of the car. His words were that I have come to teach you what is real renunciation. Now that doesn't mean we can drive up in a Mercedes-Benz somewhere or something and say, I've come to teach. We may not, we're probably not using it in the service of Krishna. It's a difference. It's a difference. He had come to teach something very, very different. And Prabhupada, to much extent, he used the same principle in so many places. Harikesh Prabhu didn't want to go to Russia to preach, and Prabhupada was emphatic, you're going to go. And Harikesh said that there are no vegetables, because vegetables were very difficult to get hold of. There was only 1 or 2 vegetables. So Prabhupada, then he told Prabhupada that what if I have to eat meat to preach in Russia? And Prabhupada said that you have to eat meat, then you eat meat, but go and preach in Russia. And he said, well, what about my consciousness, Prabhupada? And Prabhupada uses the words, damn your consciousness. But you have to go and preach in Russia. He never had to eat meat, of course, he says. He went and he lived on so many other things, but he said the principle was there of this nirbandha Krishna sambandhi yukta vairagya uchyate. In California, when Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, New Dwarka, when the community was 300, Prabhupada speaks about this when he was there. He stayed there probably the longest in the West, in New Dwarka. And the manor is number 2 in the world where he stayed the longest. So at least we're number 2 here. And when he was speaking, he said, we have a community of 300 devotees here. And we have dozens of offices. And we have 4 apartment buildings. I haven't been there, but maybe they're big. I think it's a whole road, I think. He said, we have a book warehouse, we have a stately temple, and we have a large factory. And he said, men and women, young children, they dance, they sing, they eat sumptuously, they work hard, they handle large sums of money. And Prabhupada, then he concluded, he said, they are all practicing renunciation of this material world. And then, when he was there, he said to all of them, he said, while he was walking there in the temple, he said to all of them, that in New Dwarka, because Dwarka's place of opulence, Vrindavan is renunciation. So he said, Dwarka is such a place of opulence, and New Dwarka is exactly the same. He quoted this verse, Anashaktasya Vishayan Yathartham Upayunjita. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhi Yukta Vairagya Uchyate. And Prabhupada, he asked that this quote be written on the sign and be hung in a prominent place in the temple, because it pinpoints the essence of the LA temple and its spiritual success, that its activities and paraphernalia are directed not for anyone's sense gratification, but for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So such a sign was posted there, just to talk about this principle. The second verse that Prabhupada is speaking on, and he speaks on this, which I thought we'd just look at for a few moments as well, is from the Hari Bhakti Vilas, and that was the verse. What did Prabhupada quote? Yes. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. So that's from the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is the 6 divisions of surrender are the acceptance of those things which are favorable to devotional service, the rejection of unfavorable things, the conviction that Krishna will give us protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, and full surrender and humility. These are the 6 divisions of surrender. And Prabhupada in the purport speaks about that if we want to perform devotional service, one must accept only things which are favorable and reject that which is unfavorable. So it's an interesting principle. And in the Bhagavatam, if we look at the story of Bali Maharaj, and we look at that pastime with Vaman Dev, at one stage, Sukracharya, who was the spiritual master of Bali Maharaj, he was telling him, don't surrender to this young boy, because actually it's the personality of Godhead. He's come in disguise. So don't surrender to him. And Bali Maharaj, he decided to reject this principle. And that's an interesting principle again, that accepting that which is favorable and rejecting that which is unfavorable. So Bali Maharaj made a distinction that although I'm being instructed not to surrender to the Supreme Lord, I have to reject this instruction. So in our lives, it's very similar. People may tell us to go away from the devotional path. It's never the same. Perhaps this ISKCON, who knows? This temple, who knows? All of these things may be quoted to us. But here the story of Bali Maharaj is there. That, we have to reject, whoever it is, reject that instruction. He was rejecting it from that. And Prabhupada, in speaking, he speaks about this principle. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he comments that Krishna, he broke the pride of 2 individuals by 2 different ways. He says with Bali Maharaj, Atmanivedanam, he took away everything to break his pride. And with Sudama, his pride was that he was proud of his poverty. Sudama was very proud that he was in poverty. So Krishna broke his pride again, and he gave him everything. So different ways Krishna deals with different individuals. He may take away everything, or he may give us everything. But it's all to break our pride, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. Prabhupada also says, on this principle, he said, Krishna, he tested me twice. He said, once he tested me when he took away everything. Isn't it? The factory was burnt down, the job was lost, there was nothing there. He had nothing left. His wife had said, it's the tea or me. Prabhupada said it's the tea or me. She was selling his Bhagavatams for tea biscuits and so on. So in the end, everything was taken away from him. So Prabhupada said he was very much tested at that stage. And he said the second time he was tested was after opening 108 centers all over the world. Who else has 108 houses in every prominent city in the world? People may have houses, but who else, as Prabhupada says, has thousands of servants that serve him in all of those houses, hand and foot. So Prabhupada said he was tested when he had so much. That will he use it for the service of Krishna? So I think similarly in our lives, we may be tested when everything is gone or everything is given. So it is our choice how we respond to these things. And then finally, the third verse that Prabhupada speaks on was, yes. Prabhupada connects all of these things very much. Again, this is from the 11th canto. Bhakti Parish Anubhava Viraktir Anyatra Chaishatrik Ekakali Tushti Pushti Shuddhapayo. He is speaking on this principle, and the translation is devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. If we're surrendering, three things should be happening in our heart. Just as if you're hungry and food comes to you with each morsel, you eat, three things happen. So first is tushti. The more hungry you are, the more you relish the food. More hunger, the tastier the food, I think. Isn't it? If you're full, the tastiest food is not inspiring. Shishirada Gokulananda ki, Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shishi Gaur Nitai ki. If we've just eaten a big feast at the Vyasa Puja, as we may have, and we ate to the full, and somebody offers you the tastiest preparation, it's not inspiring anymore. It's not inspiring. Tushti, prapti. With each morsel that we eat, you get nourishment, you get your energy back. And finally, shuddhapayo. With each morsel that you eat, your hunger reduces. So the same thing in our devotional service, that we can taste the holy name, the form of the Lord, Krishna Katha. And of course, Satsvarup Maharaj, he gives that analogy in his in the Japari form, that according to the degree that we have jaundice, according to that degree we will taste the holy name. Depending on that, how much less we have the principle of jaundice. In the purport to that verse, I'll just read a little bit here, because it very much speaks on what we are speaking about in this purport today, about renunciation. Here it is. This is Hridayananda Maharaj, 11th canto. So, the word virakti is very significant in this verse. Virakti means detachments, whereas tyaga means renunciation. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the word renunciation can be used in a situation in which one considers giving up an enjoyable object. But by considering everything to be potential paraphernalia in the service of Lord Krishna, as described in the previous verse, one need not give thought to renunciation, for one uses everything in the proper way in the service of the Lord. Yukta Vairagya Uchyate. One should not make an artificial show of renouncing the material world. Rather, one should systematically train the mind to see everything as an expansion of the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just as a hungry materialistic man, upon seeing sumptuous food, immediately desires to put it in his mouth, this is interesting, an advanced devotee of Krishna, upon seeing a material object, immediately becomes eager to use it for the pleasure of Krishna. So I thought that was interesting. That's in the purport there. And going on in the purport, without the spontaneous hunger to engage everything in the service of Krishna and to dive deeper and deeper into the ocean of love of Krishna, so-called realization of God or loose talk about so-called religious life is irrelevant to the actual experience of entering the kingdom of God. So that's an interesting thing. Just as a hungry man, he's really anxious to get his teeth into a sandwich. Similarly, someone who's properly trained in devotional service, he tries to eagerly see how can we use everything in the service of Krishna. And Prabhupada very much, in his life, he used everything, wherever he could, in the service of Krishna. I was browsing through the Krishna book as well, earlier coming up to Janmashtami. And Krishna, he remained in the lives of the Vrajavasis in three different ways, and similarly he remains in our lives in three different ways. Firstly, Krishna remains in our lives through his memories. Any material memory is not really real. But memories of Krishna is as good as association of Krishna himself. And this brings great hope and inspiration, just as it did to the residents of Vrindavan. Krishna had left to go to Mathura or Dwarka, and they were just remembering him in a variety of ways. So this is quite interesting, that material memories, they're not really real. You know, they come and go in our lives. But the remembrance of Krishna, that's really real. So that's one way that he appears within our lives and he remains within our lives. Memories of him. Through whatever we've read, we can always recollect them. The second way that Krishna remains in our lives is by his promise. In the Vrajavasis, he had promised them he will come back. What is that book? Shivaram Swami says, I'm coming back. Yes. Krishna, he says, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. So Krishna says, I will return. And this sustained the lives of the Vrajavasis, that he'd promised them that I will come back. Isn't it? In Janmashtami we had the promise. I think they were using the same principle, the promise, where Krishna promises all of us. And in fact, in the Gita, he also promises us, Ma Suchaha, do not fear. His promise is, do not fear. If you ever go to South India, and you go to a place called Kanchipurna. Anyone been there? Kanchipurna? And the famous deity there is, remember that? Beautiful, self-manifest deity. South Indian there, devotees telling us, reminding, Varadaraj. Varadaraj. Beautiful deity of Krishna. And when you go there, he has his hand like this, his right hand, and written in diamonds in Tamil, would it be Tamil? Tamil. In writing in Tamil are the words Ma Suchaha, which is Krishna saying in the Gita, do not fear. Do not fear. So I think there's a benediction. That deity is self-manifest. So whoever goes there, it's said that Krishna will promise that whatever fear you have, it will go away. So hundreds of people appear there on a daily basis. So Krishna, he is promising us Ma Suchaha. And then finally, the third way that Krishna remains in our lives, and he remained in the lives of the gopis even, in reading in the Krishna book. And he remained in their lives, and he sent his devotee, Uddhava. He sent his devotee, Uddhava, to give them hope. So similarly, Krishna, he sent to us Prabhupada. And that's how Krishna remains in our lives, to give us hope. Just as Uddhava gave the gopis hope. But of course Uddhava, he realized that he was preaching to the gopis. He thought they didn't know much. But then at the end he realized that they were more advanced than him. So it became a difficult situation for him. He said, I'm preaching to those who are more advanced than me. I thought I was more advanced. Krishna had taught me the Uddhava Gita, so I'm telling all of them, giving them a message. But I've just realized that they are more advanced than me. So how can I tell them anything? Of course, at that stage, he then prays that he can remain a creeper. He can remain a creeper there at that stage, and that's what we find at Narada Kund as well. Krishna remains in our life, I believe, very much through what's known as Sangha as well. The association of devotees, as we've seen, Uddhava was the principle of that. And association is such an important thing. There is a story in the Puranas of what the importance of association is. When Narada Muni came to see Lord Vishnu, he said to him that I want you to find out what is the importance of association. So Narada Muni said, well, who shall I ask? He said, well, go to the material world and ask this worm. And ask the worm, what is the importance of association? What is the effect of association? So Narada Muni, he came and he spoke to the worm. He can speak to anyone. And he said to the worm, what is the benefit and the importance of sadhu sangha? And the worm, it died immediately. So he thought, well, okay, I don't know what happened there. So he came back to Lord Vishnu and he said, well, I don't know what happened, the worm died. He said, well, go and speak to this calf. This calf. So he went and he spoke to this calf and he said, what is the importance of association? And as soon as he spoke that, the calf died. And he became very worried. Because he thought, my God, am I killing all of these? The worm died, now the calf died. I will have to incur the sin of killing a cow. So he became very worried. And Lord Vishnu, he said, no, the calf died. I don't know what happened. And then Lord Vishnu said, well, now go and speak to the prince. Go and speak to the prince. And the prince was a young boy. And he said, speak to him. So he arrived there, and now he was a little worried. Because every time he spoke to someone, they were dying. So he thought, if the prince dies, I'll really be in trouble. So he went up to the prince, and he said to the prince, what is the benefit of Sangha, sadhu Sangha? And the prince didn't die this time. He was happy, and the prince started to laugh. And he said, Narada Muni, don't you recognize me? And Narada Muni said, am I meant to? He said, yes. I was the same worm that you saw. I was the same calf that you spoke to, and now I am the prince. That is the power of association. That I was a worm, but because you associated with me, for a moment, I became a calf. Evolution. In the Vedas, the calf is the last, the cow is the last one before you come to the human form of life. And now I am the prince, and now you are speaking to me. I will surely go back to the spiritual realm. So these three things I thought were interesting. That how Krishna can remain within our lives, his memories, his promise, and the devotees that he sends through their Sangha. Often we think when devotees do instruct us, we think it's not me that they're instructing. Whenever we hear a class or someone is being instructed, we always think it's for everyone else, isn't it? I definitely think that. Whenever I hear a class and I think, yeah, they're talking about someone else. But actually, really, it's always about us. It's all about how we can, and that story is there of the man. I think Srutidharma may have sent that to me a long time ago. There's a man, he's walking with a dog, and there's a person behind him, and he says to him, "Hey, what are you doing walking with that donkey?" And the man turns around and says, "It's not a donkey, this is my dog." And the man says, No, I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to the dog. So sometimes we always think the instructions are for someone else, actually they're for us, because we've forgotten. I thought that was an interesting way. And just ending on a note here, the story is all about Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa, and of course Prabhupada, he initiated Alfred Ford as Ambarish. And I think that's a great example of this purport, which is all about Yukta Vairagya, how to use everything in the service of Krishna. Ambarish, he talks about the fact that he would have to go with Prabhupada to so many homes in India. And Prabhupada would give the lecture in Hindi. I think it was the Birilas, different people. And then Prabhupada would ask him to stand up. And he would stand up, and then Prabhupada would speak again in Hindi, and then he would tell him to sit down. And Ambarish remembers that he went to dozens of programs like this, and he didn't understand a word. And all he was doing is, in the middle of the lecture, Prabhupada would ask him to stand and sit down. And his realization was that just by this one endeavor of standing up and sitting down, he was pleasing Prabhupada immensely. Although he didn't understand anything. Just this one endeavor of standing up and sitting down. Because Prabhupada, of course, was saying, this is Alfred Ford, he's given up everything. And then, of course, Prabhupada had instructed him to buy the Detroit mansion. Again, a great principle of Yukta Vairagya, a very opulent place. And Prabhupada said, this is the home of Krishna. This is the home of Krishna. And finally, ending on this principle, when many reporters had come to see Prabhupada in India and said, you are building all of these amazing buildings, Swamiji. Beautiful buildings. He said, but you are meant to be such a renounced person. Why are you not living under a tree? That's what you should be doing. And Prabhupada said that I can live under a tree. But if I had not built these mansions, would you come here? Would you come and meet me under a tree? He said, so I have built them just so that you will come here and worship. But personally, I'm very satisfied living under a tree. Srila Prabhupada ki. Any comments?